Imagine it's 1954 in New York City.
Okay.
So years before Bob Dylan or, Joni Mitchell would ever even set foot in Greenwich Village, there's this solitary woman. She's just sitting in her apartment with a guitar, and she is quietly inventing the entire modern singer-songwriter genre.
Just completely from scratch, right?
Exactly. Just her thoughts and a reel-to-reel tape recorder. I mean, she is doing something that is completely unprecedented for the time.
Yeah.
And then 20 years later, after pivoting into this really high-level geopolitical academia, she packs up her Volkswagen Beetle, drives away, and is literally never seen or heard from again.
It's the absolute definition of his historical phantom.
It really is.
Like a true missing person case that's completely intertwined with this unheralded, staggering genius.
Right. And so today, for this deep dive, we are tracking that phantom. We're looking at the life, the intellect, and the enduring mystery of Elizabeth Eaton Converse.
Better known to the world today as Connie Converse.
Yes, Connie Converse. So our mission today is to follow her incredible journey. We're pulling from a really comprehensive historical and biographical overview of her life, and we're going to track her from being an academic wonderkind in New England to a pioneering underground musician in New York.
And then into her later life, right?
Yeah.
Like as a political activist and managing editor in Michigan.
Exactly. And finally, into the total void of her disappearance. And for you listening, as you look at her journey here, it raises this ultimate question about hidden figures in history.
Yeah. Why do some brilliant minds get recognized immediately and others, they have to wait half a century to be heard?
Right. We're sitting right at the intersection of art, societal expectations, mental health, and something that's truly haunting, which is the literal right to disappear.
What's so compelling is how her life just forces us to question all our basic assumptions, about success, about legacy, and the basic trajectory of a human life.
Totally.
I mean, we're looking at a woman who lived several distinct, highly accomplished lives, yet she felt profoundly alienated from all of them.
Yeah, and to really understand why her music and her life choices were so quietly revolutionary, we kind of have to look at the rigid world she was pushing against.
Oh, absolutely. Let's start right there in Concord, New Hampshire, where she was raised.
Right, so she was born Elizabeth Eaton Converse in August 1924.
And the environment she grew up in was intensely strict. She was the middle child in a very devout Baptist family.
Her father was actually a minister, right?
Yeah, he was. And that detail is really the foundation of everything that follows. Growing up in a minister's household in New England in the 1920s and 30s, I mean, that meant living under a microscope.
I can only imagine everyone watching you.
Exactly. Every action, every word, every single ambition was weighed against this very specific moral and social expectation. You were meant to be a pillar of pious, community-focused respectability.
But there was also this creative spark simmering underneath all of that, right?
Yeah, there was. Music historian David Garland noted that her mother was considered highly musical.
Oh, interesting.
So right from the start, Elizabeth is caught at this intersection. You've got rigid religious structure on one side and this latent artistic expression on the other.
She also had an older brother, Paul, and a younger brother, Philip. And Philip was 5 years her junior, and he ends up playing a massive role in her story later on.
He really does.
But Elizabeth, and she's still Elizabeth at this point, not Connie. She was just undeniably brilliant. We're not talking about a moderately good student here.
No, not at all.
She was the valedictorian of Concord High School, and she won 8 different academic awards when she graduated.
8 awards across multiple disciplines. I mean, that level of comprehensive intelligence is incredibly rare.
It is. And that brilliance lands her a prestigious scholarship to Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts.
Which, if you're a celebrated, intelligent young woman in that era, that is the exact approved trajectory.
Right. You go to a prestigious Seven Sisters college, you get a respectable degree, and you marry well. That's the plan.
That's the blueprint. But then, after just 2 years of study, the pivot happens.
This is where it gets crazy.
She drops out of Mount Holyoke entirely. She leaves Massachusetts, moves to New York City, starts going by Connie, and just completely reinvents herself.
I mean, the psychological leap required to do that just cannot be overstated. For a minister's daughter in the 1940s to abandon a prestigious academic scholarship for the unknown reality of New York City.
It's a staggering severing of ties.
Yeah. It's wild. I think it's easy for us today to view this through that classic romanticized trope, right? Like, the smart kid moves to the big city to find themselves.
Oh, for sure. We see it in movies all the time.
Right, but doing that as a single woman in the late 1940s, without a safety net, without the blessing of your strict religious family, that wouldn't have felt like a fun adventure.
No, it would have been terrifying.
The isolation must have been immense. It was an act of profound rebellion. She was moving to places like Greenwich Village, Hell's Kitchen, Harlem. It was gritty.
It was a complete rejection of her programming. In New York, Connie actually began smoking and drinking, which were behaviors entirely against her religious upbringing.
Wow, total 180.
Yeah, she was actively, physically shedding the skin of Elizabeth the minister's daughter and stepping into the identity of Connie the independent New Yorker.
And naturally, this caused massive friction back home. For decades, the accepted narrative was that her parents entirely rejected her music career.
Right, that was the story everyone believed.
Yeah, biographers and fans long believed that her father never even heard her sing before he died. They thought she was completely cut off.
But history is always messier than the myth, isn't it?
Always.
A tape recording surfaced from 1952 that completely complicates that narrative. The recording reveals that during a family visit to her apartment on Grove Street in New York, she actually did sit down and perform her songs for her mother and father.
Oh, wow. That contradiction is so poignant.
It really is. It shows that beneath the rebellion and the geographical distance, she still harbored this deep desire to be seen and heard by her family.
She wanted their approval even as she ran from them.
Exactly. She invited them into her world, into that Grove Street apartment, to witness this new identity she had forged. It highlights the deeply human complexity of her situation.
So she has this new freedom, this new identity. What does she actually do with it?
Well, practically, she gets a day job.
Right, at the Academy Photo Offset printing house in the Flatiron District, just to pay the rent. But in her free time, she's creating something that literally doesn't have a name yet.
It's fascinating. She starts writing songs, accompanying herself on the guitar, and just performing them for friends in her living room.
And to understand how radical this was, we have to look at the commercial music market of the early 1950s.
Right, because if you turned on the radio back then, you were hearing pristine, heavily orchestrated pop, like Patti Page or Doris Day.
Or, on the other end of the spectrum, you had very traditional, straightforward, public domain folk music.
Exactly, songs about working on the railroad or old Appalachian ballads.
Right. But Connie wasn't doing that. She was writing lyrics that were highly personal, intensely introspective, and filled with this specific wry humor and deep empathy.
She was tackling themes of female sexuality, radical individualism, and the complex internal feminine experience.
And musically, too, she was different. Her chord progressions were jazzy, dissonant, unpredictable.
Yeah, these were not topics or sounds you heard on the radio in 1954. She was inventing the confessional singer-songwriter genre a full decade before it had a name.
A decade before, she wasn't singing traditional ballads. She was singing about the complex internal life of a modern, independent woman.
And her friends recognized how special it was. In 1954, one of them encourages her to perform at a music salon hosted by a graphic artist and audio enthusiast named Gene Deitch.
Right, Gene Deitch.
Yeah, he had this incredible setup with reel-to-reel tape recorders, and he is just absolutely mesmerized by her. He records her performance.
And that connection leads to Connie's only known public performance, doesn't it?
It does. She gets booked for a brief television appearance on CBS's The Morning Show.
And the contrast of that moment is almost surreal because the host of the morning show at that time was Walter Cronkite.
Wait, really? Walter Cronkite?
Yes, Walter Cronkite, the ultimate voice of the mid-century American establishment.
That is wild. You have the ultimate authority figure of the era introducing this quietly subversive, fiercely independent woman who is singing highly personal, poetic, feminist songs on national television.
Gene Deitch helped arrange that appearance, hoping it would be the catalyst for her career. But the real tragedy of her musical life is that the breakthrough never came.
It just didn't catch on at all.
Which raises such a massive question for you listening. Think about this. Was Connie simply a victim of bad timing?
It's a great question.
Like if she had arrived in Greenwich Village in 1963, when Bob Dylan and Joan Baez had softened the ground for poetic singer-songwriters, would she have been a superstar?
Or was she actively resisting the commercial packaging required to be a star in the 1950s?
Right, because she really was a genre of one. The market didn't know what to do with a brilliant lyrical poet with a guitar.
It's a fundamental question about the nature of art and ambition. She genuinely did try to share her music. She didn't just hide in her apartment.
No, she made those professional quality recordings with Gene Deitch. She went on CBS.
Exactly. And in 1956, she even recorded a full, comprehensive set of her songs for her brother Philip, titled Musics, Volumes 1 and 2. She was actively trying to document and disseminate her work.
She wanted to be heard.
She did. But the commercial machinery of the 1950s was incredibly rigid.
Yep.
You had to fit a mold. You were a pop crooner, a jazz singer, or a traditional folk act.
And Connie Converse could not be molded.
No. The rejection of her music wasn't a rejection of its quality. It was a total failure of the industry's imagination. Record executives had no bin to put her records in, so they just passed.
And the frustration of that constant rejection really takes its toll. By 1961, trying to sell her music in New York simply breaks her resolve.
She surrenders the dream.
Yeah. She packs up her life in New York and moves to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where her younger brother Philip is now a professor of political science at the University of Michigan.
Which brings us to the most unexpected pivot in her story.
Seriously. Because most people who try to make it in music and fail, they just quietly fade into a regular day job, you know? They become an accountant or a teacher and they play guitar on the weekends.
Right, they just settle down.
But Connie doesn't do that. Connie takes this massive, singular intellect, the brain, that made her a high school valedictorian and a Mount Holyoke scholar, and she completely redirects it.
It's a staggering reinvention. In Ann Arbor, she starts in a basic secretarial job, but an intellect like hers cannot be suppressed for long.
Obviously not.
By 1963, she becomes a writer for, and eventually the managing editor of, the Journal of Conflict Resolution.
That is a massive leap.
She transitions entirely from singing about the internal human condition to analyzing the external geopolitical human condition.
She becomes a heavy-hitting academic. I mean, her publication record during this time is intense. She is writing extensively on massive international affairs.
Yeah, she's analyzing the administrative merger for Papua New Guinea.
She's writing about the United States acting as a trustee. She publishes pieces on the situation in Formosa, which is modern-day Taiwan. She analyzes pilot development projects in India.
And we have to ask why she was drawn to these specific topics. Like, why would a former Greenwich Village songwriter care about the administrative structures of Papua New Guinea?
Right. What is the through line there?
The through line is systems of power and conflict. She was looking at how macrostructures dictate human lives.
Oh, that makes sense.
The Journal of Conflict Resolution was dedicated to understanding the very mechanisms of human conflict, why wars start, how societies oppress each other, how peace might be engineered.
She later got deeply involved in analyzing the domestic and foreign conflicts of England over a 600-year period, from 1350 to 1950.
And in 1965, she even co-authored a report on alternative perspectives on the Vietnam War. She was applying her intense empathy and analytical mind to the biggest, most intractable problems on the planet.
Now, to fully grasp her worldview during this time, we actually have to look backward for a second. Before she moved to Ann Arbor, while she was still in New York, she worked at an organization called the Institute of Pacific Affairs.
Right.
And what happened there clearly left a massive ideological scar on her.
It was a defining trauma of her professional life. Her biographer, Howard Fishman, details how Connie lost her job at the Institute of Pacific Affairs when the organization was targeted by the House Un-American Activities Committee.
Commonly known as HUAC.
Exactly.
And this is the absolute peak of the anti-communist witch hunts in the United States, led by figures like Senator Joseph McCarthy.
And we should be really clear here. For you listening, we are not taking any political sides regarding HUAC or the ideologies involved. We are strictly looking at the source material to understand Connie's own profound ideological journey and the structural lens through which she viewed society.
Exactly. We're just reporting what happened to her and how she reacted.
Right. So the geopolitical paranoia of the Cold War was deeply affecting domestic lives. Her colleagues at the Institute, including Owen Lattimore, who was the editor of the journal Pacific Affairs, were publicly accused of being Soviet agents.
Wow.
The organization was investigated, its funding dried up, and was essentially dismantled by government pressure.
I mean, to see your colleagues dragged in front of a congressional committee, to see your workplace destroyed by political paranoia, you can see how that would radically alter someone's faith in American institutions.
Absolutely. Fishman's biography quotes her reaction to this McCarthy era, and it is a piece of writing that just stops you in your tracks.
What did she say?
She wrote, "We have become a nation of awful paradox. Hysteria inlaid with unconcern, literacy woven with misconception, democracy wrapped up in tyranny, boldness nailed down by fear. I have no doubt of the outcome, but I dread the interval."
Democracy wrapped up in tyranny, boldness nailed down by fear. That is the writing of someone who is deeply, viscerally disillusioned with the structural realities of her society.
Yeah, she wasn't just casually observing politics. She was feeling the structural failures of society on a personal level. The institutions meant to protect intellectual freedom were the very ones destroying it.
And that analytical, highly critical lens only sharpened over the years.
Mm.
By the late 1960s, so around 1968 or 1969, which is a period of massive civil rights upheaval, she was living in Michigan and became actively involved as a white member of a group called People Against Racism.
This is where we see her intellect applied directly to domestic structural issues. She wasn't just participating in marches. She was doing what she always did, analyzing the root code of the problem.
Which leads to this incredible document from the sources, the VETHED memo.
Right, the FETD memo.
She wrote a dense 7.5-page manifesto titled An Experiment Toward Ideological Consultation. She was trying to systematically dismantle the concept of white racism.
And again, just to maintain our complete impartiality here, we're not endorsing the political framing, but simply conveying the ideas Connie put forward in this memo.
Right. We're just looking at how her mind worked. She defined racism as a frozen pattern of exploitative domination dependence.
And that's where the acronym FEDD comes from. Frozen pattern of exploitative domination dependence.
When you look closely at the text of that memo, she structured it meticulously. She broke it down from Section A, covering basics and goals, all the way through to defining how structural and institutional oppressive forces operate.
She argued that these forces perpetuate the status of Black people as perennial losers in American society. But she also noted, with characteristic academic rigor, that there is probably no single correct method to combat white racism.
Because it's too complex, right?
Exactly. Simply because neither racism nor society itself is that simple. It's a complex, multi-layered system of exploitation.
Think of her like a brilliant software coder, right?
Okay, I like that analogy.
She started out her life trying to build these beautiful, intricate, deeply personal consumer apps, which were her songs. She wanted to connect with people one-on-one.
Right, right.
But when society rejected those apps, when the industry told her there was no market for her personal truth, she didn't just quit computers, she dove into the back end.
Wow, yeah.
She started trying to debug the corrupted operating system of American society itself. She's looking at the code, the geopolitics, the systemic racism, the international conflicts, the government paranoia, and she's trying to rewrite it.
That's precisely what she was doing. She was a systems thinker who started with the micro, the individual human heart, and expanded outward to the macro, which is global and societal structures. She was trying to fix the world on paper.
But you know what happens when you spend all your time staring directly into the corrupted operating system of humanity?
It begins to take a severe toll on your own internal circuitry.
Exactly. And this brings us to the tragic unraveling of her life. By 1973, despite all her intellectual success and the vital work she was doing, Connie is completely burnt out.
She is dealing with deep, pervasive depression. The awful paradoxes of the world she had been studying for a decade are crushing her.
And then the ground gives way beneath her professionally. The Journal of Conflict Resolution, the publication she had poured her life and intellect into, moves to Yale University at the end of 1972.
And this happens after it was essentially auctioned off without her knowledge.
Without her knowledge, imagine the profound betrayal she must have felt.
Oh, it's devastating. The institution she helped build, the place where she found her intellectual home after the devastating rejection of her music, was just sold out from under her.
It was a massive professional and personal loss. She was suddenly adrift again.
Her friends and colleagues in Ann Arbor could see her spiraling. They were incredibly worried. They actually pooled their own money together to send her on a 6-month trip to England.
Hoping that a radical change of scenery, a break from the American political landscape, would help her reset.
But the depression was too entrenched. The trip to England offered no relief. Shortly after, her mother asked her to go on a trip to Alaska. Connie grudgingly agreed, but it was a deeply unhappy trip.
Yeah, rather than providing an escape, her displeasure with the Alaska trip seems to have only solidified her feeling that she could no longer relate to her family or the world around her.
And then comes the final devastating blow. She receives some serious medical news. Doctors inform her that she needs a hysterectomy.
Her brother Philip later said that this information absolutely devastated her.
And we have to view this through the lens of a 50-year-old, unmarried woman in 1974 who has already lost her career and her artistic dreams.
Right.
Beyond the physical trauma of a major surgery, a hysterectomy carries immense psychological weight. It forces a confrontation with bodily autonomy, aging, and the medicalization of the female body.
When you look at the accumulation of these events, the professional betrayal with the journal, the failure of the interventions by her friends, the unhappy family trip, and now the physical and emotional toll of this medical news, you see a woman who feels entirely stripped of her agency.
The structures she relied on were collapsing, and now her own body was requiring traumatic intervention.
And she was navigating all of this as a fiercely private person.
Very private. Jean Deitch and her brother Philip both noted how guarded she was. She would often give simple yes or no answers about her personal life.
There is speculation from both Dite and Philip that she might have been a lesbian, right?
Yes, which in the 1950s and 60s would have added an entirely separate layer of profound isolation and required secrecy. Though it should be noted, her nephew later stated there was no evidence of her having any romantic relationships at all.
Regardless of her orientation, she was carrying an immense internal burden entirely alone. She had no partner to lean on.
No, and her family observed that she was relying much more heavily on smoking and drinking towards the end of her time in Michigan. The pressure was just visibly crushing her.
Which brings us to August 1974. Connie has just turned 50 years old. She sits down in her home in Ann Arbor and writes a series of handwritten farewell letters to her family and friends.
In the letters, she tells them she's intending to make a new life in New York City.
But the reality of her actions and the subtext of her writing suggests something much more final. Howard Fishman's biography actually takes its title from one of these letters, which was typed and left behind in her filing cabinet.
Yeah, it was titled, "To Anyone Who Ever Asks If I'm Long Unheard From."
The text of this specific letter is one of the most articulate, profound, and heartbreaking expressions of existential exhaustion you will ever read.
It really is, she writes. This is the thin, hard sublayer under all the parting messages I'm likely to have sent. Let me go, let me be if I can, let me not be if I can't.
Let me not be if I can't. That phrasing is just chilling.
It is. She's explicitly outlining the possibility of her own non-existence as a viable, perhaps even preferred option. She's asking for permission to cease existing.
She talks in the letter about how she's been the object of affectionate concern to her friends in Ann Arbor. She acknowledges that they gave her financial and spiritual support, that they tried to help her get a new toehold on the lively world.
But then she just states, flatly, have failed.
She goes on to reference that trip to England that was meant to save her. She writes, "In the months after I got back from my desperate flight to England, I began to realize that my new personal incapabilities were still stubbornly handing in. I did fight, but they hung in."
She's diagnosing her own mental health struggle, these
Oh.
personal incapabilities.
Exactly. She recognizes the depression. She acknowledges that she fought it, but she is admitting defeat. The fight is over.
And then we get to the final paragraph of that letter, which truly encapsulates the unique, brilliant mind of Connie Converse.
She writes, "To survive it all, I expect I must drift back down through the other half of the 20th, which I already know pretty well, to the 100th, which I have only heard about. I might survive there quite a few years, who knows? But you understand I have to do it with no benign umbrella. Human society fascinates me and awes me and fills me with grief and joy. I just can't find my place to plug into it, so let me go, please. And please accept my thanks for those happy times. I am in everyone's debt."
Human society fascinates me and awes me and fills me with grief and joy. I just can't find my place to plug into it.
It's devastating.
It's a breathtakingly sad diagnosis of her own life.
Yeah.
Think about everything she had done. She had analyzed global conflicts. She had dissected systemic racism. She had written deeply empathetic, complex music.
Right. She understood the mechanics of humanity better than almost anyone alive, but she couldn't find the plug for herself. She understood the machine, but she couldn't exist inside it.
Alongside these philosophical farewells, she also sent a very practical letter to her brother Philip.
Right. She included a check and asked him to make sure her health insurance was paid for a certain amount of time after her departure, but instructed him to stop paying the policy on a specific date.
It's so methodical.
Yeah.
She was expected to join an annual family trip to a lake later that month, but by the time these letters were delivered, Connie had packed her belongings into her Volkswagen Beetle, driven away from Ann Arbor, and was never heard from again.
Just gone.
The aftermath of her departure is just silence. Complete historical silence. Several years later, someone mentioned to her brother Philip that they had seen a phone book listing for an Elizabeth Converse in either Kansas or Oklahoma.
Wait, really? But Philip never pursued the lead. Why wouldn't he?
It's hard to know for sure. He might not have pursued it out of respect for her explicit written wishes, let me go,
Yeah, that makes sense.
or perhaps out of a deep fear of what he might find if he went looking. A decade passed. About 10 years after she vanished, the family finally hired a private investigator to try and track her down.
And the investigator's conclusion is something that just stays with me. He investigated the case, came back to the family, and told them that even if he did manage to find her, he couldn't force her to come back.
Right.
He told them it was her right to disappear. And after hearing that, the family respected her decision and stopped looking. It was her right to disappear.
It brings up a profound philosophical point about autonomy.
It really does. Think about what that means for us living today. For you listening right now, is it even possible to truly disappear today, the way Connie did in 1974?
It's virtually impossible today. Your phone pings a cell tower every few minutes.
Right. Your credit card leaves a geolocated trail. Facial recognition cameras catch you at the gas station. Traffic cameras log your license plate.
To disappear today requires either immense, off-the-grid wealth or deep, profound desperation. You have to actively fight the infrastructure of the modern world to vanish.
But in 1974, you could put your life in a Volkswagen Beetle, drive across state lines, pay in cash, and simply cease to be the person you were. You could become a ghost.
And for decades, that is exactly what Connie Converse was. A brilliant ghost who left behind a filing cabinet full of tapes in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
But the story doesn't end in that filing cabinet.
No, it doesn't. And this is where we enter the final incredible chapter, the resurrection of Connie Converse.
Because while Connie the person wanted to drift away into the 100th, 20th century, her music refused to stay buried.
Fast forward exactly 30 years from her disappearance. It's January 2004. Gene Deitch, the graphic artist who recorded her in his living room back in 1954, is now 80 years old.
And he's been living in Prague since 1959.
Right. He gets an invitation from a New York music historian named David Garland to appear on his WNYC radio show, Spinning on Air.
And during this broadcast, Deitch pulls out these old reel-to-reel tapes he made half a century ago. He plays a Connie Converse song called One by One over the airwaves.
And the reaction is immediate. People listening in New York are stopped in their tracks. Two listeners in particular, Dan Zula and David Herman, are absolutely mesmerized by what they hear.
They can't believe this music is from 1954. They're so inspired that they decide to track down any additional recordings of this unknown woman.
They essentially become musical archaeologists. They source the remaining recordings from Deitch's collection in Prague.
And crucially, they also locate that filing cabinet in Ann Arbor, the one containing the music recordings Connie had sent to her brother Philip in the late 1950s.
They meticulously compile this music, clean up the audio, and in March 2009, 55 years after the songs were recorded, a compilation album is released by Lauderet Recordings. It's titled How Sad, How Lovely.
The release of How Sad, How Lovely was a cultural earthquake in independent music circles. The reviews were absolutely stellar.
The Los Angeles Times music critic Randall Roberts called it one of the most joyous reissues of the decade.
Australian singer-songwriter Robert Forster wrote about the marvelous, undeniable connection between her lyrics and her melodies.
The album was so successful, it was later reissued on vinyl in 2015 by Squirrel Thing Recordings in partnership with Captured Tracks.
Suddenly, this woman who couldn't get a single record executive to look at her in the 1950s was being celebrated globally.
And the legacy just explodes outward from there across multiple mediums. Howard Fishman writes a play based on her life and produces an album of her previously unrecorded sheet music called Connie's Piano Songs.
Then, in 2023, he publishes the definitive, massive biography of her life to anyone who ever asks.
The music world completely embraces her. In 2017, the legendary avant-garde musician John Zorn releases a tribute album called Vanity of Vanities on Zodic Records.
And look at the artists who contributed to this. Mike Patton, Karen O from the... yes, Laurie Anderson.
These are massive, boundary-pushing artists paying homage to a woman who recorded her songs in a living room.
The modern dance world even embraces her with a piece called Empty Pockets, staged at the Miller Theater.
Her influence seeps into modern indie music effortlessly. The final track on Canadian singer-songwriter Dana Gavansky's 2020 debut album, Yesterday Is Gone, is an homage to Connie called Memories of Winter.
A documentary film called Talking Like Her is broadcast globally in 2021.
And then we reach what has to be the pinnacle of musical recognition.
Oh man, this part is amazing.
In 2024, the acclaimed classical singer Julia Bullock wins the Grammy Award for Best Classical Solo Vocal Album.
Her record is called Walking in the Dark, which takes its title directly from a Connie Converse song that Bullet covers on the album.
A Grammy Award.
Connie Converse's music wins a Grammy 70 years after she recorded it on a reel-to-reel tape in Greenwich Village.
Unbelievable.
And the momentum isn't stopping. Just this past year, in 2024, a singer-songwriter named Hope Levy debuted a 55-minute one-woman cabaret called The Connie Converse Universe that won Outstanding Musical at the San Diego International Fringe Festival.
The BBC broadcasted an entire documentary about her called Dreaming of Connie Converse in December 2024.
The 2022 indie film Roving Woman is dedicated to her. It is a full-blown, undeniable cultural resurrection.
Which forces us to step back and analyze why. Why did a 2004 audience instantly connect with a 1954 sound that had been entirely ignored in its own time?
Well, as David Garland pointed out during that initial radio broadcast, everything we value in singer-songwriters today, a hyper-personal perspective, deep psychological insight, fierce originality, empathy, wry humor, was abundant in Connie's music.
The modern indie music landscape is built entirely on acoustic intimacy and vulnerability. Connie was speaking a musical language in 1954 that the rest of the world wouldn't learn to speak for another 30 or 40 years.
I have to ask the cynical question here, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Do we, as a modern culture, love Connie's music purely because it is genuinely brilliant art? Or do we romanticize it? Do we elevate it because of the true crime element?
That's a fair point.
Because of the mystery of the Volkswagen Beetle and the disappearance? Does the tragic narrative artificially inflate how much we value the art?
It's a highly valid question. The mythos of the missing artist certainly acts as a powerful hook. It draws people in.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Her status as a missing person adds an undeniable, haunting resonance to her lyrics, which so often dealt with themes of deep loneliness, roaming the world, and feeling disconnected from society. When you hear her sing about leaving, knowing she actually did leave forever, it hits harder.
Right.
But to answer your question directly, the music absolutely stands on its own undeniable merit.
You don't think it's just the mystery?
Not at all. You don't get covered by John Zorn and Laurie Anderson purely based on an interesting biography. You don't win a Grammy in 2024 for a song written in 1954 unless the composition itself is structurally and emotionally masterful.
That's very true.
The chords are complex, the melodies are unpredictable, the poetry is sharp. The mystery might be what gets a modern listener to press play for the first time, but the sheer genius of the music is what makes them stay.
Let's bring this all back together. We have traced the incredible fracturing arc of Elizabeth Eaton Converse. We watched her go from a brilliant, award-winning valedictorian in a strict Concord Baptist household to a rebellious, guitar-slinging pioneer in Greenwich Village, inventing a genre that didn't even exist yet.
We saw her pivot into a formidable geopolitical intellect in Ann Arbor, writing dense academic treatises on global conflict and defining the structural realities of systemic racism.
And then we watched her unravel under the weight of societal paradoxes, professional betrayal, physical illness, and deep isolation, culminating in her packing her car and becoming a literal enigma on the highway.
It is a life of incredible, almost unbelievable multiplicity. She was an artist, an activist, an academic, and ultimately an escapee.
She saw the structures of the world, the rigid commercialism of the musical industry, the paranoia of the political systems, the suffocating societal expectations for women, and she found them all entirely insufficient.
Which brings me back to her final letter. That devastating note she typed and left in her filing cabinet. She wrote, "I expect I must drift back down through the other half of the 20th, to the 100th 20th, which I have only heard about. I might survive there quite a few years, who knows."
She wrote those words feeling she had completely failed. She felt she couldn't find her place to plug into human society.
But today, right now, in the 21st century, millions of people are plugging into her.
They are listening to her voice, they are studying her words, and they are feeling deeply understood by a woman who drove away 50 years ago.
It's beautiful, really.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. When Connie drove away in that Volkswagen, seeking the 100th 20th, did she actually achieve exactly what she set out to do?
Did she successfully bypass a society that couldn't understand her and deliver her genius directly to a future timeline that was finally ready to listen?
Maybe Connie Converse didn't fail to find her place in the world. Maybe she just knew she had to wait for the rest of us to catch up.